It's rare for a sci-fi writer to be famous enough, to be known enough, to be truly, deeply hated. Robert Heinlein dominated American science fiction of the 20th century with novels like The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and Starship Troopers. Amazing ideas. Ideas like only military veterans get to vote and bombarding humanity with meteorites because you're not a fan of the deep state. Wowzers. People called him a fascist, but Ra was more like your crazy contrarian uncle who just says mad shit at Thanksgiving to get a rise out of those darn kids. Then you've got L. Ron Hubbard, widely, and I think we can all agree justifiably, reviled for turning space opera into a celebrity-endorsed cult that is phoning its lawyers as I speak. Also, his books were just unremitting trash. H.P. Lovecraft's racist poetry, Orson Scott Card's open homophobia, Isaac Asimov for being a gropey old man, and a lot of die-hard fans really hate Andy Weir for basically being the Nickelback of science fiction. But none of them attracts the kind of intense, sustained, white-hot rage reserved for one woman. Ayn Rand.
Look, it's very hard to explain. It's almost impossible to convey to free people what it's like to live in a totalitarian dictatorship. I can tell you a lot of details. I can never completely convince you because you are free.
And yes, Rand is a science fiction writer. Don't even start. With over 10 million copies sold, Atlas Shrugged might be the best-selling adult sci-fi novel by a woman in the last century. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, 8 million. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, maybe 2 million. And as Rand is her mirror dimension evil twin, Le Guin really should be winning this. In the words of science fiction community member Michael Mai Indy, a revolutionary mystery about trains and unobtainium and zero-point energy and superweapons that culminates with a cloaked city in Colorado, Ayn Rand wrote science fiction. But people deny it. Why? Because it's standard human behavior to deny any credit to those we hate. And we really hate Ayn Rand.
But I don't think of it.
Rand's novels are just poorly written adolescent power fantasies, utterly unreadable.
True, but this does also describe every book written by Brandon Sanderson, and he's beloved. And like Sanderson, while Rand's sentences may be shoddy, her training as a screenwriter gives her books compelling dramatic structure.
Let's remember, Rand died in poverty and on welfare after a lifetime railing against handouts. Hypocrites.
Half true. Rand died quite wealthy from book sales with a large Manhattan apartment and an estate worth millions in today's dollars, but nonetheless claimed welfare for medical expenses, so not a regular hypocrite, more of a rich hypocrite.
Ayn Rand is the patron saint of selfish sociopaths. Her books are a great way to find out which of your friends lacks basic empathy.
Not true. Rand is a minor but important contributor to a philosophical tradition of selfishness. And the questions posed by that tradition are why we hate Ayn Rand. Let's play. Who do you hate more? Is it Jordan Peterson, tearful adoptive dad to Generation Incel, or Judith Butler, rebellious grandma to a generation who changed their gender as often as earlier youth changed their taste in music? How about Michel Foucault, the bald French academic who called everything a prison, or Roger Scruton, the tweed-clad Brit who thought beauty died in 1780. And for the main event, Friedrich Nietzsche, the mustachioed German who killed God, then went mad, or Karl Marx, the bearded German who literally wrote the book on capitalism. It's an actual hobby of mine to go to evangelical churches and gun clubs in the American Midwest and drop Karl Marx into conversations. Or to hang out on the lawns of expensive liberal arts colleges while reading 12 Rules for Life and Atlas Shrugged. The true sign of greatness in our polarized online times isn't who loves you, but who hates you, and why. If Ayn Rand had only written one science fiction book, she'd probably be applauded alongside George Orwell as the mother of socialist dystopia. Her first SF novel, Anthem, came out a decade before 1984. If a nightmare future of collectivist conformity where the word I has been lost sounds familiar, it might be because she cribbed it from Yevgeny Zamyatin's novel, We. Whether Rand read Zamyatin before writing Anthem is a matter of some scholarly flame wars and shitposting. But either way, if Ayn Rand had stopped writing after Anthem, she would likely be occasionally lauded as a classic of science fiction. But Rand did not stop writing.
Your parents, did they die in Russia or did they come here to the United States?
No, I came here alone and I don't know. I have no way of finding out.
Ayn Rand's life was a heroic story of individual self-creation worthy of an Ayn Rand novel. Born Alyssa Rosenbaum to a middle-class Jewish family in Russia, her family loses everything in the Russian Revolution. She survives, gets a state-funded education in screenwriting, thank you Lenin, and escapes to America to become a writer. A young woman refugee who becomes a screenwriter, a best-selling novelist, a public intellectual, and the founder of her own philosophy. It's a heroic arc. And it's all built around one question. The question at the heart of Ayn Rand's work. Who gets to create? Ayn Rand's entire career rests really on two books, published 14 years apart. We'll start with the second and most famous.
Who's asking? Someone who knows what it's like to work for himself and not let others feed off the profits of his energy.
Who is John Galt?
The best word for Atlas Shrugged is unhinged. Rand by 1957 is wealthy, famous, surrounded by flatterers, addicted to amphetamines, and commands complete adoration from the followers of her new philosophy. Rand is basically the 1950s Jordan Peterson.
The question, did that happen, begs the question, what do you mean by happen? Do you believe in God? What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God?
Including bad-tempered pseudo-babble when challenged in interviews.
You are married?
Yes.
Your husband, is he an industrialist?
No, he's an artist. His name is Frank O'Connor.
Does he live from his painting? Is he supported in his efforts by the state?
Most certainly not.
He's supported by you for the time being? There is no contradiction here.
No, because you see, I am in love with him selfishly.
Rand's fame peaks with the publication in 1957 of her magnum opus, Atlas Shrugged, the science fiction novel which illustrates most of her worst ideas.
They say you're intractable, you're ruthless, your only goal is to make money.
My only goal is to make money.
Yeah, but you shouldn't say it.
The Atlas of the novel are the wealthy capitalist elite of the United States who, sick of oppressive state regulation, decide to go on strike.
They are not getting my medal.
We'll find a way to fix
The
this.
best thing about Atlas Shrugged is the painfully bad three-part movie adaptation it inspired in the early noughties. Haters claim the movies missed the spirit of the books, but in truth this cheesy, low-budget love child of Falcon's Crest and the Avengers is the perfect adaptation of Rand. If you ever need to convince someone of the absurdity of capitalism or the ridiculousness of capitalists as a class of people, Atlas Shrugged does the job splendidly.
Maybe you should let me explain.
Maybe you should let me finish speaking!
Atlas Shrugged is an absurdly self-serious novel that becomes inadvertently hilarious as the capitalist elite disappear up Galt's Gulch and nobody really notices.
The John Galt line.
The huge mistake, the cripplingly massive mistake, at the heart of Atlas Shrugged and much of Rand's work is Rand's answer to her own central question: who gets to create?
Who is John Galt?
It's us who move the world.
Rand somehow believes that America's capitalist elite, that bankers and newspaper barons and the industrialists that Rand adores, are the creative engine of American civilization. And they simply aren't. Capitalist elites practice not wealth creation, but wealth extraction. They extract wealth from the creativity of others. So when John Galt and the other capitalist parasites disappear, Americans barely notice. So you should read. Speed read. Don't waste too much time on it. Atlas Shrugged as an accidental expose of the pantomime at the heart of American right-wing politics. John Galt and his cult are fighting against the meddling power of government. But in reality, the US government is almost entirely controlled by capitalists like John Galt. Then, when the resulting mishmash of conflicting private interests lead to complete state stagnation, the capitalist elite deny responsibility by blaming big government. Atlas Shrugged gives the American right wing a nightmare fantasy of the deep state to hate and a utopia of capitalist freedom to dream of. Galt's Gulch is arguably the only true capitalist utopia ever written, the forerunner of Peter Thiel's seasteading fantasies, Balaji Srinivasan's network state, and the emerging plan to make Gaza a tech billionaire Mediterranean retreat. Libertarians hate utopia, unless it's their utopia. The objectivist philosophy that Rand puts into the mouth of John Galt in his famously dull and ridiculously long monologue is fine. Objectivism is just Aristotle's virtue ethics with extra bells and whistles. Of course, humans should aspire to high virtues. But the real philosophical discussion, which Rand never touches, only begins when we get real about our failure to reach those virtues. The American capitalist class have never and will never fulfill even the basic qualities of Rand's objectivism. Elon Musk is never going to be courageous and temperate. It's just not in his porn-addicted K-hole personality to be a Marcus Aurelius.
You wrote to me once, listing the 4 chief virtues. As I read the list, I knew I had none of them.
Ayn Rand's most famous novel is a work of flattery, directed at the American right-wing elite, that inadvertently shows you everything wrong with that elite. But Rand's other great novel is a very deliberate and quite brutal critique of America's other elite. Atlas Shrugged accidentally shreds conservatives. The Fountainhead aims at and hits the heart of liberalism.
Drive your fucking
Logan Roy is the kind of selfish billionaire that Ayn Rand adored. The Roys throw their money behind conservatives and ultimately behind fascism, because the Roys are entirely selfish. They can't comprehend that anyone would ever be unselfish. In HBO's Succession, the new money Roys fly out to meet their foils in the drama, the old money Pierce family.
Wine is triumphant? No. Your vagina trumpets.
I triumph in the truth.
Oh, right, of course, truth.
Who support liberal causes, give to liberal charities, and use their media empire to fight for the values of liberalism. The Pierces are the good elite. Kind of.
I have no illusions about who Logan Roy is. Call me a romantic, but I happen to believe that the presence of Pierce news cameras was what stopped certain East German border guards from opening fire in 1989.
Yes. Commendable.
But when we dig into the details, the Pierces are every bit as selfish and greedy as the Roys. They've just been doing this longer and have learned that it's better to hide their sins behind a mask of liberal virtue. After seasons of hating the Roys, we finally have somebody worse to hate. Because at least the Roys are honest about who and what they are. Howard Rourke is a massive cock.
My purpose, my life, is the work itself. My work done my way. Nothing else matters to me.
Despite this, the protagonist of The Fountainhead manages to be the only sympathetic leading man that Ayn Rand ever wrote. Rourke is not a billionaire industrialist, but a young architect struggling to fulfill his authentic vision, and which he does, spoiler alert, eventually succeed at.
This is Howard Rourke, possessed of a great talent, but unwilling to compromise his ideals at any price.
And in narrating the heroic arc of Howard Rourke, Ayn Rand delivers a brutally honest answer to her question: who gets to create?
Peter Keating, selfish, weak.
Peter Keating is the early antagonist of The Fountainhead. While Rourke struggles for an authentic vision, Keating simply conforms to the incentives of the capitalist system. As a consequence, he becomes a successful architect, delivering the dull, garish buildings that generate the most profits. He gets the money, the wife, the Manhattan apartment, while Rourke ends up doing manual labour in a quarry. But when the tables are turned, Peter Keating discovers a terrible truth. As his career declines, Keating turns to painting. He even shows his paintings to Rourke, now the city's leading architect, who bluntly dismisses them by saying, "It's too late, Peter."
What are you going to do? You have to leave that up to me now.
Not for revenge, but because it's the truth. The Fountainhead is not a work of science fiction, but it's also not a realist novel about New York architects. The book is a New York fantasy, a modern myth. The 1949 movie adaptation starring Gary Cooper, Patricia Neal, and Raymond Massey, known to sci-fi fans for his starring role in H.G. Wells' Things to Come, is really quite good. And Cooper forcefully ravishing Neal is a trope of mid-20th century Hollywood. The movie and Rand's novel were a major influence on Mad Men and the iconic character of Don Draper, the closest 20th century culture has given us to a Randian hero.
My God, stop talking. Make something of yourself.
You make the lie. You invent want.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but there is no big lie. There is no system. The universe is indifferent.
Draper is Rourke, Pete Campbell is Peter Keating, and Draper is given a copy of The Fountainhead in season 1. But Don Draper is a liar and a fraud, living a false life. Most of all, Don is selfish, utterly and intensely self-centered in all things. But Don is a creator, literally the creative director of his own ad agency. Don Draper calls all the shots when it comes to creative. Not because he's a good person, but because he's a selfish person. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger explored the question of who creates in his seminal work Being and Time, and gave the answer Eigentlichkeit, most often translated as authenticity. Only those who make choices that are genuinely their own, rather than passively conforming to societal norms, will fulfill what Heidegger calls their creative self. Only those who are truly selfish will ever be truly creative. Authenticity is the value that led a generation of hippies to turn off, tune in and drop out from maintaining their personal hygiene, and many of these hippies, like Steve Jobs of Apple, went on to create the techno-dystopia we're all living in today. And then there are the Nazis. Heidegger wasn't only a Nazi member, his philosophy of authenticity helped shape Nazism. There's nothing more selfish than becoming a Nazi, and what's more authentic than being your truly murderous self?
There is no honest way to deal with people. We have no choice except to submit or to rule them.
Friedrich Nietzsche had earlier given an even more radical answer to the question of who creates. For Nietzsche, the creative will to power justified human hierarchies and even slavery, in some sense or other. Because for some men to have the free time to create, others must do the work. And the only men fit to create were those who had freed their minds from herd mentality. Is there anything more selfish than enslaving other men so that you have time to write a few aphorisms?
Out of my own mind, with the sole acknowledgement of a debt to Aristotle, who is the only philosopher that ever influenced me. I devised the rest of my philosophy myself.
Aristotle, Ayn Rand's philosophical hero, presents creativity as the act of self-creation. Only men who have cultivated their higher virtues have the wisdom to create. And what those men create in turn defines their self, making creativity, for Aristotle, the exclusive domain of natural aristocracy. The authenticity of Heidegger, the will to power of Nietzsche, the aristocracy of Aristotle, are all illustrated in the heroic character of Howard Rourke.
The Creator stands on his own judgment. The Creator thinks. The Creator produces. The Creator's concern is the conquest of nature. The Creator requires independence. He neither serves nor rules.
Rand is not the equal of her philosophical influences. Heidegger and Nietzsche hid their message in dense prose and aphorisms so only the educated elite would read it. Ayn Rand just straight up shouts the quiet bit out loud. Only the most selfish people get to create.
Why don't you tell me what you think of me in any words you wish?
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
But I don't think of you.
This makes The Fountainhead an intoxicating read for the selfish and a painful lesson for everyone else. If you've ever complained about not having time to write, if you've ever had a dream, a project, something you wanted to make, and you let it die because you were too busy or too scared or you listened to the wrong people, this book will slap you in the face with a caricature of your own excuses. It's brutal. And the problem is that, based on the world we live in, Rand is right.
Howard Rourke is the man who must be destroyed.
The Fountainhead contrasts Howard Rourke's heroic arc of individual creative fulfillment against the corporate conformity of New York's professional managerial class. Peter Keating is the first victim of corporate conformity. A life spent climbing the corporate ladder means that when Peter starts to paint, to create, he has no authentic self left to express.
Gale Winand, molder of destinies. He could rule any man except one.
Gale Winand is the capitalist at the top of these conformist corporate structures, a newspaper baron who joys in torturing idealistic journalists by making them betray their values in exchange for a regular paycheck. I mean, I can't think of any prominent New York-based journalists and media personalities who basically get their paycheck directly from billionaires in exchange for saying whatever they're told to. Except, maybe, all of them. A.G. Sulzberger, stop whipping Ezra Klein! He's recording that Billionaires Are Great podcast as fast as he can. It's widely speculated that Succession's Pierces are based on the Ox-Sulzberger family, who have owned the New York Times since 1896. And the NYT and other liberal media have never stopped publishing hit piece after hit piece on Ayn Rand ever since The Fountainhead was published almost a century ago.
Ellsworth Toohey, calculating, ruthless. He feared no man except one.
The man who refuses to submit and to serve. Howard Rourke is the man who must be destroyed.
Ellsworth Toohey is an influential newspaper columnist who, in The Fountainhead, shapes the values of liberal New Yorkers. Toohey preaches values of selflessness, but only to fulfill his own selfish desires. Toohey controls people by demanding they live selflessly, then shaming their inevitable failure. Toohey was woke before woke was a thing, an aggressive hyper-liberal using shaming and scolding as weapons in his own struggle for creative control. Ayn Rand's two most famous novels are often claimed as critiques of socialism, but really, they're brutal and perhaps accidental critiques by a Russian emigre of the two cultural elites that own the greatest capitalist nation on Earth. Atlas Shrugged is a genuinely ridiculous novel by a complacent late-career Ayn Rand that destroys the very capitalists it's trying to flatter. The Fountainhead is also often ridiculous. There's a lot of semi-naked, flame-haired Howard Rourke standing on mountaintops, or skyscrapers, or other tall things, staring into the horizon while being certain of his own greatness. But The Fountainhead is a young, hungry Rand, making a brutal caricature of the 1930s liberal elites of New York. Liberal elites that will, over decades to come, give us deindustrialization, globalization, privatization, mass incarceration, forever wars, and the other costs of late-stage capitalist neoliberalism.
Ayn, I'm sure that you have stimulated a good many people, more people than already have, to read your book, Atlas Shrugged, and The Fountainhead, and I'm equally sure they will be stimulated for the reading. Indeed, if they do not agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Whether you hate Ayn Rand or just despise her, she was a rare creator. The list of Russian women dissident Hollywood screenwriters only has one name on. Best-selling female science fiction writers in the 1950s, again, just one name. 20th century female philosophers who founded their own ideologies. It's a very, very short list. Because she lived up to her values. In one way, she was completely selfish. And when we look at the capitalist reality Rand adored, and that has only grown stronger since Rand's death in 1982.
Trump Gaza, #1.
At the dark carnival of social media influencers, billionaire-owned journalists, algorithmic content creators, video game streamers, OnlyFans, online hookers, professional conspiracy theorists, NFC collectible artists, self-help gurus, internet pimps, and the reality TV star president literally presiding over this fucking inferno. It is only the selfish who get to create in this world. That's why, for the true artist, the only thing worth creating is a better world.